Hello everyone, I am Sierra Knight and I'm excited to share with you about my time observing and hopefully teach you about the leadership styles of teachers. My objectives for this lesson are to share my observations at Summerwin STEM, share the theory of effective leadership styles, and discuss what attributes make a teacher effective. I observed at Summerwin STEM off of USIC in Boise. The STEM acronym stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics, meaning that this school puts an extra focus on these topics. Outside of normal science and math class, all students also have a required STEM class, which works real-world lessons into their application of learning with the STEM sections. The principal is Mr. Joseph Pelea, and I observed in Mrs. Brower's 4th grade classroom. The demographics of the classroom are mostly Caucasian with some Hispanics mixed in, and there is a fairly equal amount of boys to girls in this classroom. Also, she has 3 students on IEPs, or individual education plans, for behavior problems or learning difficulties, and 1 student has a full-time paraprofessional that sits in the classroom with her. Mrs. Brower's classroom has many motivational quotes all over her classroom. This one pictured is when you enter the door and explains that cooperation, positive attitudes, and respect are something that she expects from her classroom. And her philosophies also include equal treatment of all students. She requires them to respect her and to respect others, and in turn she gives her students respect. She also encourages positive actions and says things like, "Oh, you should have done this," so that this would be the outcome when her students have problems, to teach them how to better approach their next problem. Now I'm going to explain about leadership styles and come back later into how I believe Mrs. Brower fits into these categories. So there are 3 main leadership styles, and the first one is authoritarian. This style is teacher-centered and is focused on the leader directing exactly what happens with step-by-step directions. They are subjective in praise, and they are not quite as engaged in group interactions. I believe relating it to parenting is an easy way to get it to stick in our heads which one is which, because either we are a parent or we have parents. So if you relate this to a parent, it would be a strict parent, like a military-style dad, that requires a lot of respect and wants to shape and control behaviors. They are the strict parents that children usually complain about. Authoritative leadership is allowing students to make their learning their own by guiding them and giving them directions, but then letting them choose their groups and work how they please, and letting them plot the course for their end results. If you relate this to parenting, it's a parent that is direct but rational. They have standards and discipline, but they also give their child room to grow and make their own decisions and mistakes. Then lastly is the permissive leadership style, which also is named after a word in French, which I cannot pronounce, but it is basically letting students do whatever they want. The teacher only supplies information and materials when asked, and doesn't give students any feedback or praise. A permissive parent doesn't usually control their children and give in to every desire. Is usually the kind of parent that all of the children's friends want, but is not good at shaping a child for adulthood, either in parenting or teaching. In a study by Lewin, Lippitt, and White in 1939, they tested which teaching styles worked the best in a group of 10-year-old boys. They found that the authoritarian-led classroom, they had students who were more hostile and discontent, but they were a very productive class. In the permissive classroom, the students were also discontent, but they were not productive at all. And in the authoritative group, the students were content, productive, and worked together and enjoyed learning. The leadership styles do not dissect into what a successful leadership traits are. So here are some that I researched that are proven that are successful leadership traits. So styles are important, but these are also important, and each leader needs to have a drive or a passion for their work. They must have a desire to lead their classroom and be willing to discipline or praise when needed. They need to have honesty and integrity. They need to have self-confidence, have a cognitive ability to determine how to fix problems and how to teach their students, and they need to have a knowledge of education, which is understanding the process and how students learn. It'd be really hard to teach students if you didn't have this understanding. So the role of a teacher is to be a manager, a motivator, an instructor, and an evaluator. The teacher has a lot going on, and without being a good manager, the classroom runs wild. Without motivation, the kids get discouraged and don't want to try. Without instructing, they can't learn, and without evaluation, a teacher doesn't know how well students understand and when to move on to a new lesson. So now that I gave you an overview of the styles and the traits for good leaders and teachers, I want to backtrack and explain now what I saw in Mrs. Brower's classroom. I personally am confused about what I saw. I originally thought she was an authoritative leader. Then I was thinking about a classroom I observed before that was very authoritative, in my opinion kind of crazy, but the kids liked working together and were productive, and I realized that this classroom does not exude that same kind of feeling. In this classroom, with all the motivational quotes and her interactions with students, it still promoted an authoritative leader, but once I broke it down, the authoritarian style came out. I'm not sure if a teacher can be both, but she does exhibit characteristics of two leadership styles, in my opinion. So let me explain. When I walked into the classroom, it made me think of an authoritative leader with the quotes and decor, but then I started observing her teaching style. First and foremost, she was constantly demanding a quiet room, as her students were actually very rowdy, and it was hard to hear and learn. But it was almost in everything that she did. Every few minutes she was demanding quiet with another option, like either give me 5 or saying I'll wait, or doing a clapping rhythm to get their attention. Then, as she directs her classroom and lessons, she gives them all the instructions and wants them to do it just as she has. She has a doc cam that projects what she is showing on a piece of paper to the rest of the class on the board, and she will show them what to write and how to go about the project. Also, she has her students assigned to table groups and makes them work with each other. They don't have the option to work with someone else. And it was not unusual for me to observe at least 3 of the 6 tables get into disagreements with each other and have frustration or ill feelings toward each other during the middle to the end of the project. And finally, when she would pose a question, she would phrase it in an exact way and then call on students. She would usually end up finishing their sentences for them or say, yeah, like this, and then fill in with how she wanted them to answer. I noticed the students getting not upset but disgruntled frequently, but they were still a very productive group. But even after all of that clear authoritarian leadership, the hint to authoritative is how she uses a lot of praise for her students and she builds up their self-esteem. She motivates them and teaches them to show respect for others, and she tries to promote teamwork and equality. Though she is demanding, she is still a warm person, and she is not a total dictarian. So to summarize this, I believe Mrs. Brower mostly uses authoritarian leadership, but is effective in making her students listen and respect her and each other. Just because she doesn't mainly use the quote-unquote best proven style, she is still a great teacher and effective at her job. To recap on the traits of a successful leader and teacher, I believe that she does have all of these traits and fills every role. She is driven, she has the desire to lead, She is honest. She has self-confidence when working with her crazy fourth graders. She is very smart, and she knows all about the education process. She is a great manager. Motivation is her #1 priority, and she is great at instructing her students and evaluating to see how much they're learning. So this slide is a word web of some examples of what the more traits of a teacher and an effective leader. So I'm just going to pause for a few seconds to let you read through. Feel free to pause the video if it's not enough time. Ones that stick out to me are authentic and disciplined and positive and listener driven. So in summary, today I talked about the 3 types of leadership styles: authoritative, authoritarian, and permissive, and I explained which ones are proven to work the best, and I explained Mrs. Brower's style of authoritarian and slightly authoritative leadership. To check for understanding, I want you guys to complete this assessment and comment your answers on the discussion board. First, I want to know if you understand which leadership style is the most effective, and then which leadership style did Mrs. Brower exhibit. I want you to see if you can name 4 of the 6 successful traits for leaders that I listed. And then I posted this word web again at the very end so that you can pause there so that you don't have to backtrack in the video. But I want you to pick 2 words out of the word web and explain why you believe they are some of the most important keys or traits in a teaching career. Here are the resources that I used, and I also got a lot of information from our textbook. And if you have any questions, let me know. Thank you guys for listening, and I hope that this cleared up for you some questions about leadership styles and teachers. Thank you.